was thinking about it this morning. I was like, something. Right. Waiting for that shoe to drop. Okay, I was like, look at us. When I walked in, we're stuck in that one when we were at the fire station. Because I was like, oh, all these people are coming this way. I wonder why. I'm going to ask for one. Guaranteed. Because they forgot. Yes. Which I get it. Totally get it.
I'm taking a river trip.
Oh, you chewed it up?
I don't know why I did that. I never do that. I didn't. Why am I doing this?
That's awesome.
All right, I have 6 o'clock. I think we'll kick things off with the Xcel Energy update.
How's that? You can hear me? Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Ashley Valdez. I'm the area manager for community and local government affairs for Xcel Energy in Southern Colorado. And Chaffee County is one of my areas of responsibility, along with City of Salida and the Poncha Springs area as well. Pueblo, I office out of Pueblo. And then I also take care of the San Luis Valley. And I know we met with you all last year on our wildfire mitigation plan, and we did that virtually at the time, and I don't know how much of it you were able to hear or if it was good or not. So some of this might be a lather, rinse, and repeat for you, and that's okay, because we do have some new information about our operations that my colleague will share with you as well throughout the presentation. So I appreciate your time, and we won't take too much of it. I know you all have other activities to get onto as well. Next slide. So in looking this, in Colorado, we serve a combined 3.1 million electric and natural gas customers across 34 counties and 125 communities. We conduct business in Colorado and generate, purchase, transmit, distribution, and selling of electricity. We also purchase, transport, distribute, and sell natural gas to retail and wholesale customers. Now, of the power that we generate, and this is just to give you a little bit of an overview of Colorado, you'll see there on your screen, I won't read through all of those numbers, but we have the megawatts of power, you can see that there. We also have the conductor miles of line, 24,533 miles of transmission line, and then also conductor, which is our distribution across Colorado. Our electric system is comprised of 3 components. We do generation, transmission, and distribution. Electricity is generated at a power plant through various sources, and those range from renewable energy, which encompasses wind, solar power, and then non-renewable energy as well, through sources like natural gas and hydroelectric. The voltage of electricity that is generated is increased, which allows electricity to travel at a faster rate through our transmission lines and system. And then our miles of transmission line carry that electricity across the state, and then it lowers the voltage before it reaches out into our distribution system. So the way I like to think about transmission, what the difference is between transmission and distribution, I think of it as a highway. When you're driving on a highway, you're hopefully doing 75 miles an hour. And as you get off on those exits, you have to slow down to get into the neighborhood of where you're going. So our highways are your transmission systems. The distribution lines would equate to getting off of an exit and then driving into a neighborhood where the houses are. So that's an easy way for me to differentiate between the two. Our distribution system is comprised of the miles, again, of power line, brings electricity to our customers, and before it reaches our customer, the voltage, again, has been reduced. Next slide. So I know this has been a big topic, wildfire mitigation content and what that means. For a very long time, wildfire was thought of as a season, generally when it's hotter weather. But the extreme weather conditions, drier conditions, mean that wildfires are really now a year-round growth threat. And it's across the region. It's not in any one particular place. It's across the region, across the country. And we continue to experience more and more weather that's drier. And again, they're a year-round event. Colorado is no exception. Utilities across the country, together with their communities, state and local leaders, are working to eliminate threats from catastrophic utility-caused wildfires by taking a range of actions, and that's what we'll talk with you about this evening. These actions together, rather than a single point, are what's going to make a difference in reducing wildfire risk. This area in particular is high risk, and so we want to do everything that we can ensure that the city of Salida, Chaffee County, Poncha Springs, and those areas are all well taken care of while still working to provide you reliable electricity. Next slide. When we look at wildfire mitigation, we look at it as layers of defense. We have situational awareness with the technologies, and Coral will speak to that in just a little bit. We were able to do an AI camera demonstration with some folks from Chaffee County, Richard Adkins and the emergency manager operation invited several people, and we were able to explain how those work. Coral can speak to that as well. We also then layer on our system resiliency, and Cora will be speaking to that, how we're hardening our system, undergrounding where we can, and then of course vegetation management is a big part of that effort as well. And then we have our operations settings. These are two things that I will speak in detail in just a little bit. One is called an enhanced power safety setting. And then the other one that we have is a public safety power shutoff. And I'll talk about those in a little more detail. And then finally, we have outreach and communications and rebates for our customer support while we work through this wildfire mitigation. Next slide. And I think that brings me to my colleague, Coral. She's going to take over and talk with you about the ongoing wildfire mitigation work that's happening right here in Chaffee County.
Hello, my name is Coral Breidenbach. I am the Director of Wildfire Mitigation for Xcel Energy. What that really means is that I'm responsible for executing the plan, and that is for all 8 states. So we're going to talk about multiple things that we're doing and kind of go through kind of the slides, and then we're going to specifically talk about what we're doing inside this county. So one of the really neat things that we're doing, is the weather stations that we're putting in. So our meteorologists, we started using the public data that was out there, but what they really found is that we need to be a lot more targeted than just the public station. We all know in Colorado, it can be really, really different if you talk about 20-mile differences, especially when you talk about passes. So our meteorologist team has identified spots that they want to put these weather stations. And they're going to be there's 3 to 5 that they have planned inside the county that we're going to be doing this year. And that'll really help us target the weather, and then they're responsible for the EPSS and the PSPS calling those days out. So they can look at that. The other thing that we're really doing when you talk about situational awareness is the Pano AI cameras, which I heard you guys got to see them. They're really neat. So what they are is a camera that can actually pinpoint smoke, and it can actually tell the difference between like a campfire smoke and a fire that's out of control. And then those alerts, they send it to our emergency management team, but then they also send them to the emergency managers in the area. So you can actually see, and we have bunch of testimonies of people that they've actually been able to see that the fires are there before they get called in by the public, so they can go out there and catch the fires before they really take off. Do you have any questions about this one before we move on? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, the pole maintenance and the system resiliency. So what we're doing is we are assessing the poles. We have new technology, but it's not really new technology, but it's new to the industry how we are using it. So we have drone teams that will actually go out and they will fly the lines. And then for every pole, they'll take 5 different pictures of the pole at a high resolution camera. So you can actually zoom in, and then we have linemen that will actually go and look at the photos, and they can see everything. You can see a pin backing out of the bolt. I mean, you can see everything. So they can actually go in and look at this. But the new technology has caused that we have a lot more work because we're able to see those little things instead of seeing it from the ground. So we've went ahead and we've been assessing the lines around here. We're going to be doing 3,000 more poles this year where they go in and do the pictures. So far last year, we replaced 310 poles in the area. And that included, they actually did 26 poles over Monarch Pass with the helicopter.
That was
Next slide, please.
Monarchy. Yeah, they did it there too. He's doing the work
So
on-
we're also doing, the pictures are kind of reactive. Really, we're doing some proactive too. So we're going through and we're identifying what we call small wire. So it's just aged wire that we are upgrading to much stronger wire in the system. So this year, we're going to be rebuilding, it says 9.5 miles, but I do want to say that a lot of that will be into 26 and won't be a lot in 25. There's about a mile that they're really starting in 25, and then it'll be really the 8.5 miles kind of going into 26. So we're going to be replacing those almost 10 miles of line. And again, that wire is just much stronger and it's much more resilient. Next slide, please. Sorry. Okay, and then we're also doing component upgrades. So what we found was that some of the components that are on the system, even though they're way up in the air, 35, 40 feet, when they go off, when they have something happen, it can actually put an explosion down, which could start a fire. So as we're doing these rebuilds, we're going through and we are updating all that equipment with the non-expulsion fuses, better cutouts, better lightning arresters. And then we're also putting up wildlife guards because wildlife can start a fire too when it gets into the equipment. So we're putting up a lot more of the wildfire guards. Next slide, please. Okay, and then we're also doing, our veg management is going to be expanding. So we are targeting the wildfire areas for obvious reasons, but we're putting them on a tighter cycle, and then it will be larger. Just so you guys know, it's going from 6 feet to 10 feet, and what that does is just gives us more defensible space around the equipment. Next slide, please. Okay, do you want to take on the? Sure. Sorry.
So as I mentioned last year when we did our presentation, we have 2 new operational settings for our wildfire mitigation plan. The first one is an enhanced power line safety setting. And basically what that is when we know that we've got some major wildfire danger because of the atmosphere, be it the weather conditions, is it really, really dry? Is there enough moisture in the air? And our group looks at it and determines that we need to go from normal settings, where the, power line's just flowing perfectly fine, into the wildfire mitigation settings. They can go into 2 settings, and there's the first one, which is your enhanced power line safety setting. This allows power to continue to run through the lines as it normally would. But the difference is, when normal operations are taking place, if we have like a bird or a tree, something that hits the line and causes a fault, under normal conditions, that line will open and close 3 times with our reclosers to try and clear whatever that fault is. After the 3rd time, if that line still does not clear, the power then will go off, and we will send our crews to look at it. So that's a normal operational setting. With these new settings, to make sure on the really hot days when there's not moisture and there's a greater fire risk, we incorporate that enhanced power line safety setting. And what that does is, instead of opening 3 times where you wouldn't even notice that something was happening, gives it that opportunity to clear a line. If something hits the line and impacts it, it then opens 1 time, and it's called one shot. And we keep that open so our line crews can go out and actually have eyes on the line to look at it and ensure that we're not starting any wildfire, and that everything is okay with the system before they reset it. So that is one type of enhanced power line safety setting. Now with this, it means that we could have more outages than normal. We've learned some lessons from when we first instituted it last year. The crews do not have to drive as much line as they normally, or not, I wouldn't say normally. They don't have to drive as many miles as what we originally thought. So we can, lessen that space that they have to check out. And that'll mean it's a shorter outage. Still an outage, but a shorter one. Now, with the Public Safety Power Shutoff, or PSPS, that is in an absolute extreme where you've got 100 miles an hour wind, 80 miles an hour, whatever those winds, and it's just causing havoc across the system in a particular area. And we have to make the call as to whether we're going to proactively shut off power until it is safe. It's not anything that we like to do. I mean, it's really contrary to what we do as an electric company. But it is a mitigation factor, and it's one that we use when there's not any other option. When for example, the enhanced power line safety setting is just not going to do what we need it to do. Next slide. As you can imagine, with a public safety power shutoff that is done proactively, there actually is more proactive work in working with the community and communicating that with the community. We will work with our elected officials. I work very closely with Christy and her office. I also work with Chaffee County with Richard in emergency management. And we would do that proactively. We're looking, 48 to 72 hours in advance to say we are looking at the risk levels right now, and they're such that we would need to institute this, extreme measure of proactively shutting the power off. And then we'll also work with our stakeholders that are in the communities. We'll work with businesses to let them know. We'll work with critical infrastructure like hospitals, for example, to let them know in advance that this is coming. And then we just do everything that we can to communicate well so that they know it's coming. What is really important for our customers to know is we can get in touch with them if they request for an emergency notification on their account, but we can't do that if their information is not updated. What I have noticed, and this was for me, I wasn't experiencing this, but I realized that my phone number on my electric account was a number that I had like 100 years ago, before everybody had cell phones, didn't have landlines anymore. And so it's important that customers update their information. And if they prefer to get a text message or that, they can do that absolutely by updating and being prepared in the event that something like a planned power outage would have to take place. We have not had to have one of those in the Chaffee County area, but we do want to let people know to be prepared. We are working through engagement with the community. We're also working with food banks. We understand that, even a shorter power outage, that could cause some problems for people with food insecurities or even just anyone because of grocery prices and what they are. So we're working with our community partners on something like that as well. Rebates for backup generators and batteries are proposed in our wildfire mitigation plan that we have put forward to the Colorado Public Utilities Commission. So that is important. That's a really good piece for folks to be prepared, is to purchase generators if they have, someone that's on medical or your business is critical, to that, which many are. So that's what we're looking to do with those rebates. We're not approved quite yet for that, but I will keep you all informed when that happens.
So
Next slide.
Amy, is that
Yes.
the main thing that Xcel is able to provide for people who are homebound and attached to some kind of medical device, a generator?
We do not provide those. With 1.6 million electric customers in the state of Colorado, as a regulated utility, we do not provide those. There are some programs, and your emergency manager's office is aware of these programs, where they can get medical batteries, the backup for those. Those are available and out there, and we are working in our community engagement to also get word out to our customers that is taking place. We have put information in customer bills to let them know to update their information. And, we just try to work proactively with them, but we do not provide generators. We are looking to, in the future, have possible rebates for folks to purchase generators to help on the cost with that.
Right. And so then if I was on oxygen and I got this notice, then I got to figure out what I'm going to do.
Right.
If I'm going to leave the county or, for a while.
Correct.
Until it's over or whatever.
Right. Personally, my husband was on oxygen for a while. And what we did was we made sure we had the one that plugged into the wall, and that was great. But we also made sure we had a couple of tanks in the event of an emergency. So that's how we would like to work with customers, to let them know, be prepared. I mean, it doesn't necessarily just have to be an electric outage. You could have a blizzard. You could have all kinds of things, and we're just encouraging people to proactively be prepared. Have a plan for what you're going to do with your medication, how you're going to work with that. So I know the emergency managers throughout the San Luis Valley and this are having those discussions too, because they get those requests and, don't necessarily have the resources for each one of those things. So it's really a family, work to take care of your families and as you can. Yeah.
Thank you for explaining that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I mentioned just briefly our wildfire mitigation plan that was submitted to the Colorado Public Utilities Commission this last fall. Next slide. That's the end of it. We are waiting on some decisions on that wildfire mitigation plan. It has many of the elements that we talked about tonight involved. And we do anticipate that that's going to be approved, through settlement or however that comes about. But we do have a settlement, and I can share some information with Christy on that as well. Sorry. Any additional questions for Coral or I?
I'm curious that, because you're replacing so many poles and you're doing so many things, shall we expect less power outages or more?
So if we had to put it into hotline tag, which is when it doesn't reclose right now until we get the EPSS installed, yes, right? There is going to be power outages if something gets into the line. What we found, though, is as we are doing these other things, we're seeing a lot less in areas. So when we really started targeting, Evergreen was kind of our biggest and hottest area at first. And they're seeing a lot less power outages in that area. So in the EPSS, and which we are going extremely fast, faster than we ever have before, to try to get those into all of our recloser devices, when those are on, it'll really, really help. So, yeah.
We look forward to that.
Yeah, we do too. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Last summer, I think it was, when we had the long power outage, and a lot of businesses felt like they lost sales because, you know, we have to make hay when we can here in Salida. Was that due to the PSPS, the EPSS, and what can we tell our business community to do to prepare if that should happen again?
Right. So you've got numerous reasons for an outage. We have the wildfire settings that we just talked about. We have planned outages where we're doing work and we let our customers know in advance that it's a planned outage. We anticipate it's going to be from this time to this time, and they do receive phone calls, like a automated message on their phone for those. So that's a planned outage. We have momentary outages that are anywhere from 0 to 5 minutes. Those are considered momentary, and then you've got the longer ones. So last year was a combination of whatever a regular outage could be. I mean, like I know on the Brews Rendezvous, which we're a sponsor of, that was a big outage, and it impacted a lot of people, and it's my understanding that was caused by wildlife, a bird. Getting into the line took the line down, and then we had to go out and restore power. So you can have normal operational settings and still have outages. We had some of those. We also had the ones that didn't do the 3-time, start and stop, trying to keep it going, and those were the wildfire enhanced power line safety settings that caused those as well. As I said, we had learned a lot of lessons from when we first instituted this last year. So for example, in one area, we had our crews patrolling 40 miles of line, and you can imagine how long that took. And so now they might only need to go from point A to point C to patrol. So we are working on that. I strongly encourage businesses, if they can, to look into having a backup generator. And 2, if they have experienced losses from a power outage, we do have a claims line. They can certainly file a claim with Xcel Energy. It's on our website. I can send that to Christy, and the link is right there. And people have applied, and they've been reimbursed for losses from business due to outages. So I would strongly encourage folks to look into that. I will tell you the work that Coral and her team and then our other operations group are doing. It will make a difference. It's going to take a little bit of time to get there. But once we do, I won't say that we'll never have another outage, because that's not realistic. But what I will say is it will improve the reliability over what you all have seen over the last couple of years. And I know it's hard. And I'm just hoping that it's less this year. The outage times will be less, but we will still continue to have those for a while. So if people can file that claim through our claims line, that will be helpful and beneficial for them as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question.
Okay.
With the claims line, so I would definitely be interested in more, so I can pass that on. Is that, so a business can go on there, a restaurant that is affected for 4 or 5 hours that can't run on a backup generator, because some of them cannot. The backup generator is great. If you're like in here, it would be great. We don't have, natural gas to cook with.
Sure.
They file that online and then they get reimbursed for their lost sales?
I can't speak to the exact, how that it works exactly. I don't work in it. But it would be like any other, insurance claim that you have. You put it in, they process it. Coral, do you have any additional on that? No. But I will get you some information as to how that works.
That would be great. And is that also for residential, or do you know?
It's both. Yeah.
Okay,
It's both.
great. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Coral and Ashley, for coming in.
Sure.
So you spoke, Ashley, earlier to how the electric reliability, you've rated it as 99.98%. I think Salida would probably say 1. It's not reliable here, and it's really disappointing. It's been happening for years. And for that reason, I am curious if staff could look into maybe getting Sangre de Cristo electric, if that's a possibility. I don't know. You look at a map, we're really the only one besides Pancha throughout the whole area that uses Xcel. I don't know if it's worth looking into, if you guys think so, but.
Oh, yeah,
It's definitely worth a
I
second
think
to
it's
look
worth
into.
looking into.
Okay.
And what I can tell you just from a format point of view and information about that, Xcel Energy has a franchise with the city of Salida. The franchise does not dictate where we serve. What is determinative of where we serve is set by the Colorado Public Utilities Commission and was set back in the 60s, I believe. So each Sangre has its certified area through the PUC. Xcel has its. Black Hills Energy in Teller County and Pueblo, for example, has its area. So we are certified through that. You are more than welcome to look into what that option would be for you. But I just want to set that out there. It's not like going to a different store because utilities of scale and the cost for providing utilities across the state of Colorado. So,
Thank you.
you're
I see.
welcome.
You see where this council is at, though, right?
I do.
Especially after last summer, it was brutal.
Right.
It's brutal. I became felt like I was an employee of Xcel, having to answer for the short.
And I
shortcomings.
apologize for that.
Yeah. Well, it's good to see that there are some things, crews driving less miles to limit the size, scale, and duration of disruption. It would be good to see, to give the public more than those little things. Oh, yeah, sure, yeah. Go.
With the massive cuts that we've seen, funding-wise and personnel-wise to our fire districts and the personnel that go out and fight these fires that are occurring. I'm just wondering if Xcel Energy has ever reached out to some of these fire districts and try to, put in a plan to maybe help them along, or try and, just to help with the situation that they're kind of facing right now, especially into the future, going into the drier seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those fire districts are being cut, cut at the knees, and they're picking up a lot more, putting a lot more on their plate.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if Xcel has anything in the plans to reach out to these districts and kind of maybe, talk to them and help them through it in any way.
We have, one, I work very closely with the emergency manager's office and first responders. We have also just been approved for 2 additional positions that are called resiliency positions, and those positions will work directly with first responders, such as fire districts, the emergency managers groups, to address some of the concerns that you have. The AI pano cameras that Coral mentioned, those are available, and your fire protection districts have access to those cameras and have been provided a link to be able to utilize that. And those are a tremendous help because it means you can see on the cameras well in advance before you have to dispatch anybody out and waiting for someone to call in and say, oh, we think there might be a fire. So we are working diligently with the technologies, and fire departments are a big piece of that, and our resiliency person will be working with the Salida area on those.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's probably super low-tech solution, but is there something in place, knowing that outage last summer was caused by a bird? What kind of bird deterrents are used? And I'm thinking about the birds too.
Yeah.
I worry about the birds too. The animal guards is going to be the best. So when you see the new equipment, it gets covered basically all over because we don't want a point of contact in there. And then that really does help. So it looks to you, it's going to look just like plastic pieces on the equipment. But what that really is doing is protecting the squirrels, the birds, everything. So, and really preventing them from getting in there and getting hurt.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Again, moving forward, I guess that is just something that I've also to have heard is, this idea of shopping around, right, has been the pitch, right? So that's the constituent layman way of approaching it. When things start to feel underserved, then it's just like, well, let's shop around. I think moving forward, just having a bigger list, list of ways of these things being addressed, because when summer gets going, having those outages is killer. Our phones blow up. We catch a lot of heat.
Sure, and I understand that. I imagine that you do. I had a conversation with the mayor last October about it as well. And again, I understand your frustrations. Since last year, we have really ramped up the work that we're doing, the maintenance to harden the system, some of the information that Coral shared with you. This is one of those key areas where we're working really hard to get it done. And I know once it's in place, it is going to be positively impactful for you. So I know it's not right now, but it will be over the next several months that we're doing this work.
Great. Any other questions, concerns?
Thank you for coming in.
Ashley.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
And thank you, Coral. Moving on to the Chaffee Housing Authority Annual Report. It's that time of year again, yay.
Oh, such exciting reading.
It's good stuff.
Wait till I send you the audit. That's what I did this morning for 4 hours. It's captivating. Whoops, my computer just locked me out. Just 1 second. I was all ready, and then I got distracted by, I didn't realize it was caused by a bird. Okay.
I always just assume squirrel. I don't know why. Their tails are more conductive.
So, as you all know, 2024 was a year of change for the Housing Authority. I started in August after many things had happened over the course of 2024. There was a trajectory as the Housing Authority was leaving the county and spinning off into its new fully independent multi-jurisdictional housing authority. In May, the executive director left. In April, they realized they needed to debruce, and it was all hands on deck to get that ballot measure 6B passed in order to ensure that the organization even had a future. So when I landed in August, it was essentially picking up that campaign to get to that decision in November. And then the organization was able to close 2024 very, very strong. And I'll sort of go through those reports of some of those projects and the status of those. Since, it's sort of working on continuing to kind of implement those projects that were in place. So thank goodness 6B is over. The structure of these reports, sorry, you can go, I'm right on ahead. Oh, did you get my slides?
Isn't this what you sent?
That looks,
I didn't think so, but
But we got it, right?
That's what I got.
yeah, that's what I got.
I did send that. I sent slides today. That's the actual report.
We can
If
report and
not,
slides.
You'll just have to listen to me and envision the pictures of all of the buildings.
It did. I wonder why it did that.
There we go.
Okay, I don't know how to.
Thank you.
Oh, cool.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, so 1, 2 ahead. So that within the IGA, it just simply says, report on these things. In 2024, as I tried to go back at the end of the year here and try to pull, is there an actual data standards? There's some, most of it's set up for grants. And so if there are specific metrics that the city is interested in, we can build those into the reporting systems. So a lot of the metrics were just sort of generally kind of related to what I assume out of what's in the IGA you might want to know, but there's a lot of room if there's other information you want for me to provide you. So if what's in this doesn't fit, let us know. We can recreate that for 2025 sooner rather than later, because backtracking data is hard. Like one of the things I was like, how many people walk through our door? Not a metric we tracked. So very hard to recreate. So the IGA provides the funding, funding IGA provides the breakdown of how finances are contributed to the Housing Authority. And of course, the question always is, what happens to the money? The audit will tell you everything. So for 2024, there was lodger's tax reallocation that some of it went to operating and then some of it went to debt reserve. That debt reserve set aside will be there for 20 years. And when it comes out of debt reserve, we'll just repurpose it for more debt reserve because it's now sort of allocated towards that. For the staffing, if you could advance to the next slide, for the investment in operating, essentially we were able to leverage from primarily this, if the city's funding went directly to the housing projects manager salary, able to leverage $7 million in investments in Chaffee County and almost $6 just in Salida out of that $31,250 investment. So I hope you feel confident that that was a good financial investment in terms of what it produced in terms of housing. Next slide, please. So where are we with some of our projects? Jane's Place, as you know, has been one of those projects that sort of like made it to April. They were looking to close on final loans. Tabor announcement, and so it was sort of like we closed on loans in November with the board, staff, et cetera. That project now, if you've been driving by, we're at about 28%. Super exciting in terms of 28% in terms of expenditures. We've spent about $1 million so far on what you're looking at. That's what $1 million gets you, some plywood. And we were very fortunate that the state, one of those grants, that DOH grant, was actually initially federally funded. In the end of the year, they actually unbraided some of those ARPA funds. And so we were very fortunate that those dollars were not impounded in any way or curtailed. So fortunately, the project's been able to move forward. We're still on track. We think if everything goes according to the current trajectory, we could even save some money, which would be amazing for that project. One of the impacts to that project from what is happening at the federal level, we actually had a 5-bedroom, one of those units is a 5-bedroom apartment that was going to be reserved for AmeriCorps members. That building will now, if AmeriCorps is canceled, need to be repurposed. There's a lot of different ways we can use it. I don't think that will be the hard thing. It's just one of those things that now we have to change that structure before we lease up. But we'll see what happens, I guess. It's the story. Next slide, please.
I have a question. So when you're talking about Jane's Place, and maybe I missed it because I was reading the slide, did you say, you said something about if we're on track, do we have an on-track date? Do
Yeah.
we have, did
Yeah.
you say that? I'm not sure. I'm sorry if you did.
Yeah, so we're on track. I probably did not. We're on track for completing construction at the end of December, hopefully lease up January 2026.
This year? Great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. It's proceeding well. The bad winter was a good winter for construction. So 505, you all are well aware of. That project was able to preserve the 505. This was financed through low-interest loans that come through First Southwest from the state. So we were able to finance most of this with a very low-interest loan and one smaller conventional loan. This project preserved those units at 80% AMI and will appreciate very, very slowly over time, so staying very affordable. We continue to see 100% occupancy in that and a lot of demand to have that because it's one of the few apartments that are deed restricted that allow pets, although the CHT currently has a few. So a really successful preservation project. Next slide, please. The other work we've done in terms of supporting housing that does not show up on our books specifically, but is one of the ways in which we're providing support to the community through our services, is our staff have become very competent at applying for grants through the state programs and are very familiar with what they finance. So we have increased our participation working with the Chaffee Housing Trust through a number of different mechanisms, but two of the larger projects that have closed this year, but initiated kind of at the end of last year, in terms of providing support, was we helped do community outreach to these mobile home parks. Mobile home parks in Chaffee County are 10% of the most affordable housing in the county total. Ensuring that they do not transition over is an important one. One of these projects, we had an out-of-state, real estate entity that wanted to acquire it. The willing and very vision-driven or mission-driven seller was willing to take a lower cost just out of the goodness of his heart, rather than the higher bid from an out-of-state. And both of these were done through, if you're unfamiliar, the state of Colorado passed a right of first refusal for mobile home parks, so that any entity has a limited number of days to try to acquire those. And so this partnership between the Chaffee Housing Trust and the Housing Authority has been very effective. The transition from a rental property to a resident-owned community is a slow transition. The goal is to put all of these into 100% community ownership and transfer those assets into those property owners so that they are not paying lot rents to an out-of-state corporation. But that is a process, and it requires building the capacity of these individuals to be able to manage their own property. Also, until those transitions happen, these are held in an entity that is a collaboration between CHT and CHA. It's the CHA-CHT LLC, and it allows the Housing Trust, which is a housing trust that does ground leases, hold property that is not in a ground lease until that transition can occur, and then they will hold that ground lease in perpetuity. So this partnership has been really effective. We are currently the property managers for these going forward. So we have a property management contract with CHT. We're about to sign one to do rent collection. They are using our new property management systems that we set up, which I'll talk about in a minute, until we can go through those processes of making those transitions. And so as Chaffee County continues to have property become more and more valuable, Like one of these is front and center on Highway 50, right in Poncha Springs. You know, we will see the value in people wanting to acquire these properties for redevelopment escalate. Because comparatively, the costs are quite low. And Reed's done a great job on sort of working with Janai to get those grants. Next slide, please. And this is just those, we created, or I should say, CHA created these tools in 2023, and this is all of the tools that we're using this year in order to be able to create these acquisitions. And they're very common tools in housing authorities. They're one of the ways when you create an LLC that you work within the laws of Tabor. So these are what we're using in terms of like creating those structures. Once those structures were created, then you can move forward with acquisitions. Kind of in the weeds, but next slide, please. So there are other projects that are currently sort of working their way through the slow process of looking for capital. We just closed last month, the board closed, and we actually just signed a few weeks ago or last week, a land banking grant to acquire a property in BV in Alpine West that will be able to be held for up to 10 years before it has to have construction financing ready to go. It needs to be completed by 15 years. A development plan needs to be provided within 5 years, but it allows the acquisition of land at today's price to be able to be held until you start to do development in the future, hopefully bringing down the cost of development as you move forward. So it's a great program through the Prop 123 land banking. You know, I think the housing needs assessment should probably guide ultimately what should work on there. The developer definitely has goals for workforce housing within the 80 to 100% AMI. That is pending some applications to the state for something called a rural resort petition, which I can deal with in Q&A. So it's definitely getting in the weeds, but it is one of the things that we have to do in this county in order to be able to continue accessing some of these funds. The other project that is moving forward, the crossing in BV, actually has 2 affordable housing parcels in it. One is a homeownership project with CHT. The other is going to be a, hopefully, we're in the looking for financing, a rental property. And both of those, you know, the housing project, the homeownership project is actually moving forward. Those units are being constructed by Fading West. And there's a proposal with the CHA board to try to provide some additional financing support for that project. But those are homeownership units at 80% to 100% AMI. And then lastly, you're familiar with the flour mill. More recently, Janai worked with those developers to rethink their phasing in order to put some of the affordable housing first in order to try to make the financing package more competitive against other affordable housing projects. So not yet financing on the crossing or flour mill for apartments, but we continue to look and seek funding opportunities. And there is one application out right now. Next slide, please. So this may or may not be familiar numbers, but you might be aware that there is a 2022 housing needs assessment and that there is a grant through DOLA with the county to lead a housing needs assessment update. If you follow state statutory legislation at all, you might be aware that in 2024, they passed a series of housing bills which have implications for Chaffee County and local governments. SB 24-174, I'm looking at, if you remember, I think it's SB 24-174. And that one is specifically housing needs assessments, housing plans, and a water plan connected to your comp plan. So there's a series of statutory requirements for local government, but it has implications for how a housing authority, a multi-jurisdictional housing authority, works with the local government partners. You might be aware that this housing needs assessment methodology in 2022 is actually not compliant currently with state law. And so the grant that the county has received is to provide an update to bring us into compliance. And applications for these rural resort petitions to kind of move towards getting some future designations to allow us to access more pools of funding at the state are dependent upon the completion of this housing needs assessment. So this is a pretty big deal for 2025. And I'll get to where this is relevant to the 2024 work plan here in a minute. I just want to sort of put this in context. The Housing Authority in 2024, 2023 was tracking progress towards these. I'll show you some pictures if you're not familiar with it in a moment. However, the methodology for what the state is requiring under these new state statutes has changed. The state has moved towards more centralized planning where they have a statewide housing plan, and we as communities, you as local governments, opt into in order to access state Prop 123 funds. So you have a commitment that you have made with the state authorities to meet an X number of units. New dashboards and new housing needs assessments sort of are tailored to connect to these other statutory requirements. So the way that we have been tracking, we might still end up with large numbers, but each community then says, we're going to make a commitment to meet X% of that need by such and such a date. Failure to meet those commitments, and across the board, we've set the threshold pretty low for this first round. No doubt the state will recognize that. And I'm confident that all of our communities will meet it. The county is meeting its commitment through those housing preservation projects, housing preservation counts, new development starts, your affordable housing all count, but those are the dashboards that people are starting to develop around the state, not simply the one that we have tracked. And so I think there's a kind of partner level discussion about when the HNA is updated, is this still useful information? It could be. And then do we also need to integrate in tracking stats towards these commitments? And most communities are doing that at a regional level, because as you ratchet up your commitments, you can share when one community hits its threshold. You can then share, if you exceed it, then you could share your commitments with someone else in the county under the multi-jurisdictional approach that Chaffee County has taken. So I just wanted to make you aware. I'm going to show you what we do, but it will likely require a broader discussion in 2025 as we kind of move forward with new state rules. So what it looks like is we have this housing tracker. We work with currently just the City of Salida planning staff and the BV staff to track progress. You can advance kind of through these, but we track by location and by AMI. And so it's extremely low income, below 30%. What is the next one? Because I can't see that because I'm blind. 30 to 60%, which is very low income. Next slide, please. Maybe it didn't go through. There we go. Anyway, 60 to 80 and 100, and then it does the same thing for homeownership. And so we've been keeping track of where we're doing well and where we are not making progress. Next slide, please. And so I just want to sort of run through kind of those summaries of what we're seeing in terms of overall housing production as a result of the progress that was made through 2024. The need identified in the housing needs assessment for that extremely low income, which is 30% up to very low income, 60 to 80. We are not seeing as many units, and that is in rural resort communities, which Chaffee County is designated as. We have a higher cost to build for multiple reasons. And so across the board, across all rural resort communities, we have a very difficult time building to very low income. One of the only ways to get to that 60% AMI is through LIHTC, and we have not had a LIHTC project in a while. It takes a while to get into those queues. It takes a significant amount of effort and time, and it might be another thing that we need to start discussing is where do we need the most access to those specific very low incomes. We were able to get to 30% AMI on one apartment in Jane's Place, and we have not got below 80% on any other development project. And those are ones that we are just simply partnering with or ones we're doing ourselves. And there are multiple reasons. We could do a whole other work session just on capital finance and why it is so challenging. But it's part of our challenge. So state funds, and why this rural resort petition is important, state funding pools set maximum AMIs. A lot of the state funds hit a maximum of 60% AMI. Unless you are a rural resort community, then you can go up to an average up to, there's a whole mathematical formula. It doesn't go exactly to 100, but it allows you to average down to your lowest AMI. If we are successful in a rural resort petition to allow us to access these other pools of money that we currently cannot make pencil because we do not have a local funding source large enough to cover that gap in the capital stack, our lack of building at the lowest AMIs is going to bring the AMI average down. And so Summit County, for example, is one of 3 resort communities that have successfully petitioned on this rural resort petition. Their average AMI was 80%. And they have $30 million to subsidize housing. And so that was where they were able to get. They barely got to 80. We have to kind of get through these steps, but there could be implications in terms of us accessing more state funds, which becomes even more important as more and more federal resources on affordable housing are going to dry up. So I just want to sort of flag that. You don't need to solve it, but it's something to be aware of that is part of like what we're learning through the last year of doing housing development projects. The state grants are very effective, and this is why you're seeing larger amounts of housing in the 80 to 120% AMI on rentals and up to 100% on housing, because those state grants are very effective at funding that. It's getting to those lower AMIs that we're really challenged with without additional local resources. So we are making progress in that regard. What just happened there to see this? In terms of like what I see in distribution from that housing tracker and where housing is occurring, your inclusionary housing program is very successful. You are getting units built. You have a lot in the pipeline, which we are very excited about. But we are seeing more homeownership down here and more rental in the northern end of the county. And likely, you know, we're going to need to do more homeownership in the northern end of the county and find more apartments in the lower end of the county. But we will see what the needs assessment says. The methodology that they've developed is good. It's very, very rigid. So I think we'll learn some new data from that. Next slide, please. So we have now, at the end of 2024, when we took control over the 505, it transitioned and launched the Housing Authority into property management. We went from 0 to 20, and we're now almost at 90 in a very short amount of time. So the last 4 months have been trying to build all of the systems and create the systems necessary to kind of create an effective property management program within the Housing Authority. The Emmon Third and West End and Forest Creek that we are currently managing for the Housing Authority are currently being rented. However, there will be a point in time in which those will go up for sale. The high interest rates have slowed the ability for the Housing Trust to find qualified buyers. They had people qualified as interest rates went up. That tiny little amount, even with down payment assistance, prevented some people. So some people have moved into a rental, while a rental of what they want to own. And Reed is continuing to work on those, but we are managing those in the interim, and we're managing for 6 months and 1-year leases. As well as we will also be managing the two village mobile home parks. Next slide, please. So if you haven't been to our website in a while or been on social media, we now have a listings page for deed restricted units that the Housing Authority does hold. There's currently 3 units on here that are still available. One, kind of at that, this is, I think, at the 100% AMI. Can you hit that slide, please? And then just most recently, it should advance, can you? There. This one was just listed and does allow pets, which is great. So not many of those. So we want to continue, like we got a stopgap. I've done an enormous amount of research on property management systems and financial management systems to build up the capacity of the Housing Authority. Our internal systems need to grow and be capable of allowing us to expand as rapidly as we are. We're currently using just an inexpensive off-the-shelf property management system that long-term is not going to work. And we have been in discussions with specific affordable housing property management systems that are used to dealing with things like income verification, which Turbo Tenant is not. And our other sort of property support that we do income verifications for the housing, for the city, and we also do income verification as a fee for service for the Midland. Those systems currently need a centralized system that will be more efficient because we're doing it through PDFs at the moment. And so there's some, as we grow, the systems have to grow with us. Many of the programs that are out there for housing authorities, you have to hit a certain number of units before they will even give you a price. And so we're getting closer because we started at 0. And now we're getting closer, up into those 50 to 100 is usually where those cutoffs are. And so the goal would be for the Housing Authority to continue to be able to invest in those systems to effectively manage properties as they are online in perpetuity. Next slide, please. So City of Salida inclusionary housing, enormous potential for this to take off this year. You have a lot in the pipeline. We are currently, we've got 3 units sold. We learned a few things. You just went through, I think, a deed restriction modification. One of the other learning out of that was that, we have to incorporate into the community guidelines some more specific standards on how to market. And so we're borrowing from Boulder, who has much more experience and provided us some guidance and provided us their guidelines. So we will update that before these new units come online. We have been building a relationship with the realtors of Central Colorado who are very interested in referring people that come to them looking for housing, start looking, and then realize there's nothing out there for them. And so we've been trying to find ways in which to convey the units that are available through the City of Salida's program to them so that they can make those referrals. And, we've also discussed internally with Planning Department and with the Chaffee Housing Trust, just as we created a page for the rentals, to also create one that shows all of the affordable units that are for sale, regardless of ownership. Just so there's one dedicated place to go look for that, knowing that you need to go through income verification. Continuing to work on that. And then we have recognized through just going through the process of those 3 units that it would be very beneficial to make homeownership classes more available or even to require them as part of being able to get into a unit, because what we found where a lot of people were super excited and then they started to go, they would income qualify, but when they went to mortgage qualify, their credit was not worthy and they needed to go through some credit repair. And so what we want to do is create, the support systems that most other housing authorities have, which is you partner with people to ensure there's sufficient homeownership classes, and you create programming where there's regular sort of like enroll and get into a credit program. There's a number of tools that we think we could offer our renters. So now when someone comes, rents a unit from us, one of the questions is, have you ever thought about homeownership? Because then we can start discussions with them early, help them understand that there are tools like the housing savings accounts where they can set aside $50,000, as well as a number of programs to help them get credit worthy and get ready. So lots of opportunity in growing this program. Janai has been working on sort of her own real estate license to be able to provide better guidance. So I think this year we're setting up for success and super excited about it. So bring it on, Salida. And then lastly, a lot of our programming from the beginning of this founding of this organization was founded out of the pandemic on unhoused or housing insecure, and those programs continue to exist. The one major change is in 2024, one of the primary grants that was a large partnership grant called the Health Disparities Grant ended, and that had funded a specific position within the Housing Authority called the Housing Manager, who was leading a series of meetings called coordinated entry, where all of the different providers get together and talk. And so the primary shift at the end of 2024 into 2025 is that our staff are not leading the coordinated entry meetings. That's now being led by a housing navigator through the public health. Our staff are participating in those meetings, and we are focusing on this stable families program that is focused on homeless families. One of the successes we have been able to see this year as a result of having a rental deposit guarantee program, as a result of having specific units that we are managing, is we have been much more easily been able to transfer people out of emergency housing vouchers through the housing stable family program in hotels to a rental support situation where they were able to get into a rental to become stable, and there was funding available to subsidize a portion of their rents. Much easier when you have units under your control. And so that's been a huge success. We've seen 3 different families transition into units that CHT owns, but CHA is managing. And we were able to do it at a more affordable rate than we have been able to do prior, where we were putting them in market rate rentals. So we hope that Jane's Place will be one of the ways in which to continue that programming and really allow people that opportunity to go from emergency situation into a transitional situation into a permanent situation. The rest of the housing navigation we provide, like it's not just about unhoused, we actually provide a significant amount of guidance on a day-to-day basis for people seeking rental support. And I want to just share a document with you guys. This is a listing of rentals for different incomes in Chaffee County, and I want you to look at how few there are. On the units that are below 80% AMI, and we see people come in all the time, particularly a lot of seniors lately, there are very long waiting lists. And so we shepherd people through that process of getting on those waiting lists, filling out the paperwork, applying for housing vouchers, possibly leaving the county if there is not a secure, safe place for them to live. But when we go through this process, we're sort of maintaining an understanding of where there's availability and how long the wait is, and putting people on those wait lists as soon as they can. And that's the first thing we say, get on a wait list. With the changes to federal funding, there is vulnerability in a lot of those programs that we have, because we have had access to a number of both emergency housing vouchers as well as increase the number of housing vouchers for people who are unhoused to move into properties within our region. And very likely the emergency housing vouchers will be completely expired by mid-2026, if not earlier. The state housing authorities and housing organizations are going through assessments right now, trying to understand the potential impacts. what I foresee, if those funding cuts do proceed, the supplemental budget through the federal government cut $168 million from the continuum of care, this program. Completely cut the program in total. And so we're waiting to see if the state backs that up. They're saying they are. We'll see what happens. I feel like that's the theme, right? We're seeing what happens. Our stable family program is grant funded, but we used all of our, it's a one-year grant. We get X amount of emergency housing funds per year, $60,000. It's a lot of money. And we will have used it all up probably before the end of this grant year, and it will not be renewed until July. So we're actually trying to transfer some inner budget transfers to put some more money in those emergency housing vouchers. If there are cuts and those impacts trickle into our seniors and into other individuals that are currently living on housing vouchers, we will see an increase in people coming through our door seeking support. And currently the only support we have is for families. And so we're kind of paying attention to like, what are our opportunities within thinking about raising additional grant funds to apply towards how we manage Jane's Place and working with our partners and thinking through, you know, all of this stuff is happening at the federal level. It's changing some of the needs in our community, and how do we meet that? We, as a small organization, have typically, when they were harder cases, sent people to the Front Range because the Front Range had vouchers and they had extra capacity. They are currently saying that if these cuts all proceed on the Front Range, they will not be able to absorb rural Colorado's needs. So it's not good. Not to be Debbie Downer. But there was so much we did in 2024. So we're watching that, and you know, we're not seeing it yet, but we are aware that it's there, and we're trying to keep up to date on information, and we'll share that information with you as we see it occurring.
Can I ask a question while we're right here? You mentioned the grant funding for the Stable Family Program is specific to families, and what constitutes a family per that funder?
It is, Becky knows this much better than I do. It is currently homeless, minimum one parent, one child. Cannot be sleeping on someone's couch. Has to be actually homeless. So there's a whole set of standards in there, and I'm happy to share those with you or have Becky send you the flow chart.
Thank you.
And that grant goes, it's on a federal fiscal year, so it runs end of June, or July 1st through end of June. So we are about to hit another cycle. We will have 1 year of family housing support and are going to continue hopefully through strategic philanthropy to try to fill those gaps. And I am anticipating that philanthropy will try to pivot to hit some of the social service gaps that are most likely to occur as a result of federal funding cuts to our most vulnerable. And there's some other things, like if they move forward with some of the requirements for work, the transition goal that they have is not only to cut funding, but to minimally to require anyone who is on federal assistance a maximum of 2 years. And we have seniors, disabled, many others that are permanently on housing assistance and living in Salida's Public Housing Authority. So we'll see what happens. Okay, I think that's probably, okay. Reflection on just close out. Sorry, I get really nerdy about this. I probably went a little too deep, but it's fun. So kind of key things for 2024, looking back in terms of the sort of transition, you know, it was rocky. The board, staff, et cetera, have come together. We're in a really good place. We're actually doing the things that were anticipated and expected to do. One of the things I did not touch on is the 2023 audit focused a lot on the systems for managing CHA according to governmental accounting standards. You'll love the audit, it's so fun. So we have been moving forward with that. Our 2025 budget, which you all did receive, was broken into 4 specific funds. And what we're trying right now to complete is the transition of our accounting system, which last year when I arrived was QuickBooks Business. We've at least moved over to QuickBooks Nonprofit and then have some longer term goals to kind of set all of that up. That's one of the key things. But in terms of managing the money, audit's clean. But the systems behind are complex and take a long time to put into place. And so we need to get those nailed down in order to grow, because even going from $500,000 to, potentially 11 million this year was a big jump. I covered all of these others. So just forward thinking, I think I covered regional data collection. One thing I did not mention, if you're unfamiliar, I sent out to staff our AMIs, and this is kind of across Colorado and across the country. We saw a 9% increase from 2024 to 2025 in our 100% AMI. So we went from $66,000 to 72 or 74. So there's a shift in there. Unfortunately, I only have access right now to 2023 data, so I cannot look at our 2024 wage distribution. AMI is a medium point. It means half people are on this side, half the people are on this side, but it doesn't mean it's an even distribution. And so I have the 2023 data. There was some overall Colorado issues as they were going through a systems change. The federal government would not accept their data. I can't get that specific wage data. It might still become available. It's just not available currently. So I can only compare like 2025 to 2023, but it gives a trend. But if we just 9% increase, so that's going to have some implications. In some ways it's good, in some ways it's bad. We can do a different work session on the implications, but I wanted you to be aware that that is happening.
Sure, it was 8% last year. It increased.
It was 8 from 23 to 24, yeah. Lake County hit the cap. You can only appreciate 10%. Lake County hit the 10. And I think I hit the rest of this stuff, so I'll just stop talking.
I have a question. You also have talked about needs assessment. And so how is that going? When is it going to be completed? Are you guys,
The county currently has the grant, and we are there for support. We're willing to be project managers, but currently the county has the grant and needs to take the first step because the grant is not under our authority. And I just 2 weeks ago, so the state did an analysis of all past. DOLA did an amazing job. They went through our needs assessment, compared it to the current methodologies, and provided us that feedback. I've just provided that to the county and other partners about 2 weeks ago, as well as the state just came out with a template for the request for proposals. So I think that will, with those 2 pieces of information, it will be much easier to move forward, because otherwise we were trying to figure out where the gaps were against the state statutes.
So it's progress?
Yes.
Okay.
And so hopefully we'll get on that soon, because we're all waiting on it.
Any other questions? I had a question about the rural resort petition. Where are we at in that process?
A rural resort petition needs to be submitted by each individual entity. The housing authority cannot submit for local government. So each municipality, county will all need to apply. You can only apply once we've completed the housing needs assessment.
Okay.
Because that will establish our AMI ranges that are included in the averaging to determine what we can then increase from 60% to some number to be determined.
Okay.
So, yeah, they kind of, it all goes in order.
Great. One other thing, when it comes to kind of future metrics, data collection, I feel like public outreach as far as gauging public trust needs to be, that cannot be overstated. We're kind of in a position where we need an organization like the Housing Authority. However, we've had 2 ballot measures for steady, secure funding fail. And we have a community within the county that does not participate. Those things alone feel kind of like we're swimming against a tide. I really do think we need, when it comes to looking forward, that is the messaging that I'm getting as far as whether it be a lack of trust, a lack of information, a lack of understanding, that forward-facing, public-facing piece appears to be missing. At least that's the messaging that I'm getting. So I feel like that should be of utmost importance moving forward. I don't know how else the rest of the council feels on that.
I'll say it's something that we've discussed as the Housing Authority Board quite a bit, and potential ways to address that might include focusing on programming in the coming near future, because there are some great big looming development projects on the horizon now. So, how much of that can we do, especially in the face of federal funding cuts? So starting to look to the programming that's provided to the community and where our efforts might best be spent there. And I would also invite Charlie to chime in as your other Housing Authority appointee to the board.
What do you mean by the programming? The programming that you're...
Well, the sky's the limit, really. The breadth is huge as far as what kind of programming could be provided. But just, emergency shelter being one of those, and kind of building on what Marjo said, that we are going to start to, we predict that we're going to start to see more need from those voucher cuts, things like that. So what kind of, and I'm not the housing expert, but what kind of programming can be provided to those folks? What kind of philanthropy is going to develop that the Housing Authority might be a great portal for to help support those people? We also know that Colorado is going to be a refugee state for a lot of different types of people who are no longer comfortable in their own states. And a lot of those people who might be escaping to Colorado are, going to be housing insecure too. So getting prepared for that kind of influx as well, I think, is really important. And then just doing everything we can to make sure that that's the service industry in particular, that we're doing everything that we can for the service industry as far as housing goes, because we know that here in the city of Salida, that's who we're hearing from as far as needing to be represented and served by the Housing Authority. I also think that we have really specific needs here in Salida that are not the same as BV's needs, that are not the same as the county's needs. I think we had a group work really hard to spell that out in the IGA, the intergovernmental agreement. So making sure that the Housing Authority is using that as its guardrails going forward. Christy, I don't know if you'd want to add anything to that list, but.
Great.
So
Thank you.
just, I'd add 2 things. Rental assistance works when you have units to put people in, and even with the current housing supply increasing, we still do not have enough units to put people in. And if we're putting them in units that are far above their income, because we're seeing this huge need in, the homeless, unsheltered, 30%, 60%, 75%. you want to have units that are within that in order to stretch your dollars. Because when you're subsidizing someone who earns 50% of AMI and they're in a 120% AMI apartment, you're, one, removing a space for that person, but also not addressing. So I think in construction, it's like looking for all of the creative ways in which to try to produce some of those. There are a lot of good strategies, which we have not yet been able to integrate into housing strategies. So that's one. And then I just want to go back to the communications, because those first, from August to November, pretty much all I did was get out in the public and meet people and talk to people. And I do feel like we did have some really good dialogues and make some very good progress in some of the communications around housing. Ballot measures across the state failed last year because of inflation. I think if one of the things that I think will be challenging for us is if we do enter a recession, again, a ballot measure would likely be off the table because of asking people to give more when they're hurting the most. And so what are the other alternatives for thinking about how to create funding strategies to support, potentially smaller scale projects there, like you adjust your housing strategies based on kind of where you're at. The state of Colorado is very fortunate in that we have some really stable sources of housing funding that will not likely go away, but we will likely see an increase in competition. Where we will be challenged is the communities that can contribute locally are more competitive in terms of points. And so it might be where we can utilize some of our other tools. Special limited partnership, which does tax abatement, is a financial contribution. And so how do we use the tools that we have created to look for opportunities to fund projects in more competitive times? But yes, on communication.
Yeah, just so I can keep track of how much you're nudging Pancha in the direction of support.
The
That's great. That'd be great data to mull over.
recently
Sorry.
had, I've had some conversations with their planners that are great, and we're trying to share information. Whether it's a financial contribution or contribution towards the solutions, I think that matters. And I do know that they are working with CHT, which is very positive.
Roger, could you talk about the $50,000 credit? Is that a income tax credit, and so you don't get that? And it's a first home, I'm assuming, as well.
Oh, the housing savings account. I was like,
Yes.
Credit. The state passed legislation, I can't remember the year. And so we want to be able to spread recognition that this is available. Currently, our new staff, who I did not recognize, we hired a new staff person, Daniel Flanders. Feel like we found a unicorn as our housing services manager. He's fantastic. And one of the reasons he's interested in housing, not only because he wants to help people, because he also wants to buy a house and he realizes the struggle. And so we're using him as a guinea pig. I also have one. I do not own my own home. I am in this boat too. So, we're using these state set-asides. It's almost like a health savings account, but it's a housing savings account. And so you can set it up through different qualified bank systems where you can put aside tax-free dollars up to $50,000 that then you can withdraw to apply towards a down payment.
So it's not a payroll deduction, but it's a special account that you set up and then you
Yeah.
put your money there.
Yeah, just like a health savings account essentially, but for housing.
Yeah, that's cool. That's going to help some folks.
So you contribute your own money to that?
Tax-free.
Yeah, your earned money.
Yep.
Anything else?
I had one more question. You've probably told me this before, but of the 210 units in the pipeline, any idea how many of those are in Salida? We know we have 60 with the flower
Oh,
mill.
looking back at the, there's a lot more home ownership, so I would have to break them down, but I have a back end document to this that's way more detailed than the front end dashboard. And I could pull that. It has like the project name and homeownership, AMI, all of that in it. I can't tell from just looking at that number. I probably added that up during the election just so that I could show progress. But I can't remember, that was August. I don't remember that far back, but I can find it.
Thank you.
I have a few questions. I was going through the report. For Alpine West, it was noted that there's 72 affordable apartments and then up to 6 workforce condos. Is there a difference that the housing authority sees between like affordable and workforce? Like,
That's a great question. I actually don't like using either of those terms because you can be very low income and workforce. And most people who come through our door that are also unsheltered are working. So I think workforce is not an appropriate term necessarily. So I've been using more like who are our targets, and we can look at it as unsheltered as a target, extremely low income, and that's actually a HUD term, and that's 30% below. Those are typically the people that qualify for a HUD voucher. And then you have very low income, which is like 30 to 60% AMI. That's a lot of our service worker entry level. Most, and then you have like 60% to 80%, and they're just over, like they're just stretching to get into those 80% AMI units because you can flex from 30% to 50% in terms of how much money you spend on rent. And so that's another AMI. And then like sort of the missing middle in resort communities, not in the Front Range, but in resort communities is the 80% all the way up to 140. The Housing Authority, I think, goes up to 120 in terms of its definitions. But this home ownership goes up to 140. So I think it's important when we talk about housing in our community, it's affordable for who, and it's based on these income ranges. And we want to have, as our mission says, housing for all. It's just harder to make those very low income projects pencil without larger subsidies. When you get a grant from the state for housing, there's a maximum per unit subsidy that you get. You do not get $1 million and you can apply it to 4 units. You get up to, not even guaranteed, up to $75,000 per door. So the reason we cannot get lower than, mostly 80% AMI is because we need to close that gap and we have no money to fill it with. And so part of CHA, I think its financial strategy needs to be, as we grow and increase our portfolio, we're getting resources from managing those assets, and it helps cover our operational costs, freeing up contributions from local government. But that takes time. It takes time to build. It takes time to put all of this in place. But like lodger's tax, it's not massive amount of money, but having $180,000 to $300,000 to throw at a project helps in terms of those local contributions. And so I think there's different ways. You guys have your own fund and sort of how you're piecing it together. One day that won't all be going to infrastructure, and so I think we need to keep looking strategically at the pools of money and how they get applied over time to help certain sectors. And there's some other financial tools we haven't talked about. But yeah, workforce to me is not recognizing that everybody is working.
I just don't know if it was, like if you required people who were service industry or something for those 60 workforce units or something, but it's not, it was just not wanting to repeat.
If it's a property that CHA manages, and this is a good distinction to understand community guidelines, if we manage it, we have community guidelines, and generally a grant requires that you create a housing plan and it tells you who you're gonna house. The community guidelines for Chaffee Housing Authority include certain standards like must be employed in Chaffee County at minimum 35 hours or whatever it is. I think there's some things we can talk about as those need to evolve as well as we grow and change. Different properties have different rules if they're not under our guidelines. And so those are things like we do income verification for the Midland, and so I think they're using, I can't remember if they're using our guidelines or not. That's really not a good example. The Boulders, they've got their own guidelines. Whether they're requiring someone to be employed in Chaffee County, I don't know, but we're not funding them. We haven't helped them. They're doing their own thing. So I think it's property by property. And we've talked about there's enough units out there. We need to understand the ones that we're not aware of and sort of understand it so we can refer people to them appropriately. And that also then allows us to understand where there are gaps and who's not getting housed.
And for the folks who are interested in home ownership through the Housing Authority, are they first-time homeowners, or does it have to be primary home?
It has to be their primary home in order to qualify, at least through the Housing Authority, through the guidelines. The way the rules work is you can actually have a house in a different community. Like if you're moving here for a job and you've got an asset in Alabama, that won't count against it. But if you had a house in Colorado, and this actually just happened with the final sale, I think, they had to do a contingency to move from sell this unit to be able to move into this unit. First-time home buyer programs, like absolutely there's additional resources that are available for people who are first-time home buyers that will help them get into a house. That's why these homeownership classes are so important, to help walk people through that. So I think when a unit becomes available right now, we're not restricting it to first-time home buyer, but there are guidelines on who gets to buy them, and they are targeting people employed and working in Chaffee County. Or if they're retiring, they have to have had their last 4 years of income in Chaffee County.
And it's really governed for us in Salida by our inclusionary housing
Yeah.
policy.
Correct.
One easy metric when it comes to communication is just having more of it. This is coming out of the board retreat, so we haven't had a chance to communicate it with you yet, but I think I have the feeling that for the city of Salida, more frequent reports would be appreciated. I don't know how the others
Absolutely.
feel about that. And I would invite you to, the Housing Authority, to use me or Charlie for that too, so it doesn't always have to be the director, and we can spread that out.
Yeah, and I have a standing meeting every other month with Chaffee County on their work sessions. I don't know that things change. Sometimes I show up and I'm like, well, nothing really new to report. But it has improved our kind of collaboration, and as like Reed, often we go on the same day, and there's some nice synergy there in understanding what's happening in the housing world. And so I'm happy to come when there's major events, or simply say let's do it quarterly. It's easier to put it on a calendar for probably all of us.
Yeah, I like that.
Like that too.
And it can go, it could be either what's happening, or if there's certain issues you're wanting to learn more about, we could tailor them to be specific.
So I have an additional question on, and it's back before that one, is how long, it's hard to say, I'm sure. How long does it take to go through the process? Let's say tomorrow I want to come to you, and then you teach me all of these classes and how to manage your finances and to qualify for a loan or whatever it is you're teaching. How long does it take an average person?
Well, there's different variations. It also depends on their individual situation and needs. You would probably, there's 1 day, 1 hour, just go get your certificate. You qualify for a Chaffee, some of these different loans. Chaffee has a lot of services available. They have some really good first-time homebuyer programs. Those tend to be you need to do the class in person. You can't do it online. And those are 1 day. Credit repair could be a process. It depends. That one would have to be tailored. It would be sort of a plan, strategy on sort of moving them towards their goals, depending on where they were. We're interested in adding there's some neat individual programs on credit repair of linking tenant rents to credit reporting. I actually do it. It's been great testing it out. And we'd like to do that for people through our programming to be able to link that. Turbo Tenant won't let us do it, hence we need a new one. So it can be for the folks that were coming through when we were doing the last Income verification is very quick. Like, we get a request of interest. Typically, we turn that around 24 to 48 hours, depending on, what's in the work queue that you have to rearrange. But that's a very simple verification of employment, qualify, and then sending that on to typically a real estate agent, and then the real estate agent taking it from there. So, just like a normal house, the income verification for inclusionary housing does not take very long. Finding the right mortgage, depending on your economic situation, can be a longer struggle, depending on which end of the AMI range you're at. So, trying to provide support to help people think through that earlier, because what we did learn through the inclusionary housing program was there's a unit available, and, people would see it and not know the steps to take. And so we've, again, borrowing from other housing authorities that have already developed this, kind of have a draft fact sheet that we're trying to get ready that would be like, here's what you do first, here's what you do second, here's what you do third. We do refer them to certain mortgage lenders that are experienced with affordable housing.
Local?
Yeah. And again, like, the realtors have been great on all of this and trying to figure out how they can provide support as well. So, we're trying to refine that for the next wave of units, because we want that to go smoothly.
Great.
I saw that the 7-Eleven Holman Court was expected to close at the end of last month. Did that happen?
It did.
Awesome.
Pretty sure it did. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
I think it did. Yes.
Great.
I vaguely remember celebrating it in the office. But now I'm like, oh, wait. Pretty sure it did.
That's a huge win.
Yeah.
That one's been a standstill for quite a while, it seems.
Well, it was for rent for a while. There was a lot in that one,
Well,
and
that's-
hence some of the modifications.
Wanted
Yeah.
us to change the deed restriction or take it off.
Right. Oh, that's the,
Yeah.
Well, and the marketing rules.
I'm saying something else, sorry.
Anything else anybody wanted to add? Charlie, are you good? You wanted to say anything, or no? Or you don't have to. No pressure.
I was just gonna say.
If you do say something, though, it's got to be to the mic. Yeah.
Thanks,
Just checking. I know you've been sitting for a little bit.
Well, I just, again, for the record, Charlie Goodson. I just wanted to say that I think our board is in a lot better place than it used to be. And to address your concerns specifically, I think we're looking to do more of that trust building.
Sure.
And a lot of that comes through highlighting successes, just talking about the problem more openly within different areas, going to bar trivia, if that's what makes sense, posting stuff on social media, meeting our community members where they are. I think is going to be one of the focuses. I'll be joining the sort of outreach subcommittee along with the development committee and the board development committee. So I'm really getting my teeth sunk into it. But I thought having like a quarterly meeting, I was looking for, when do I report to you guys? When do I look for your guidance? When do I ask you guys what your opinions are? And having something that's sort of set up so that our representatives, when they come into this role, sort of know what their expectation is. They know how often they should be expecting to hear from city council members. You all are the ones who put me here. And I want to make sure I'm honoring and sort of following through on what you guys see as needs for the CHA. So from where I'm sitting, I've got a lot to learn. I think it was Dominique who said it takes about a year to get up to speed, and I sort of laughed at it initially, but I get it now. It's pretty overwhelming stepping into sort of a quasi-government role, all the rules around meetings and when you can talk about things. And so one of the things I want to work on in the board development committee is smoothing out that transition. If we're going to have new board members joining every year or so, we can't have a big gap in where we're trying to get everybody up to speed before we can move forward again. So those are really the things that I see myself helping out a lot with. But yeah, it's been a great learning experience. The main reason I was here today was just to observe Marjo and making sure I'm singing from the same hymn sheet because she's our ED, she's the one who sets the tone, and I'm very big on getting on board with what the mission is. So, and if you guys have any questions for me, don't feel like I'm reachable enough, please just let me know. I'm happy to give you my cell phone number. I'm pretty good about answering or returning phone calls, but it is really important to me to make sure I'm following through on what you all think is really important for the CHA.
Great. Thank you, Charlie. Appreciate
Thanks,
that.
Charlie.
Well, I guess that's about everything we could possibly cover, I would hope,
Thanks, sir.
for now. So we'll see you tomorrow, 6 o'clock sharp.
Thank you.
Hand it on my-